Hi, so we're going to start today by talking about patterns and percussion and rhythms in Limut, at least at a basic level. So I'm going to start by just putting in something that will play a basic rhythm and we'll go from there. So what I've put in here is P is the name of a player. I've just called the player P for simplicity. This is the synth, so the play synth will play a sample. And this is the pattern. So the pattern is made up of a series of steps and each step will do something. So for the play synth, the elements in the pattern are a sample that's going to be played. So in this case it's an X and the dot means a rest, always means a rest. So for the X I'm just going to show you that you can find these. So this is the documentation. The last section in the documentation is play samples. You can look here and see that a lowercase x is a bass drum. And you can also see that uppercase X is a heavy kick drum. So for example, if I change this to an uppercase X, then we do indeed get a heavy kick drum. So we're also going to have a quick look at BPM. So beats per minute is the rate that we're playing at. So we're currently, default is 110. If I set it to that, nothing changes. If I set it to 80, we're going much slower. If I set it to 140, we're going much faster. So I'll keep it at 110 for now. So what's happening here is that we're playing the heavy kick drum and then we're resting. Now each of the steps in a play pattern defaults to being half a beat long. So together that's play a heavy kick for half a beat and then rest for half a beat. So overall the pattern is 1 beat long, and you can in fact see that we're hitting that heavy kick on every beat. So the meters up here show the number of beats counting up, and that's reflected by the BPM. If I change the BPM faster again, then you can see this counts up faster. So this is beats, not time. And then we have the readouts here that tell you how you're going through a different number of bars. You can actually set those as well, but these are useful defaults. So that would be 4 bars of 4/4 time. That would be 8 bars of 4/4 time, and that would actually be 3 bars, or you could kind of use it for 4 bars of waltz time as well if you want. But again, you can override all of these. So I'll just put it back to 110 beats per minute. If instead of the rest we play a shaker sound, then halfway through every beat we now got that shaker sound going on. So this gives you an idea of how this works. If we want to modify what's playing here, then we can set various parameters. I'm not going to go through them all, there are many, you can find them in the documentation. Amp is the amplification. So if I set that to a half, it's quieter. If I set it to 2, it's louder. Default is 1. So if nothing is set, it will default to 1. Some other things that are fun, there's parameters like fold and clip and drive. So that applies some wave folding, which changes the shape of the wave. Clip is much more aggressive, hard limiter. So we'll get some real distortion out of that, etc, etc. You can use room for reverb. All of these are defaulting to a value of 1. So that's room equals 1, but we can set a room with a much smaller reverb, which using that value, so you can also make it bigger. So you can set some basic parameters there. So one limitation of what you can do is if you use a single pattern. So for example, that's fine, but we've lost the 4 on the floor now. We don't have a kick on every beat because we're playing the snare on this beat instead. O is a snare drum. So there's a couple of ways we could deal with that. One is we could use round brackets. So round brackets mean do something at the same time. So it's like playing a chord. In this case, we're going to play the kick and the snare at the same time. So if I hit this, so we now have the heavy kick and the snare hitting on every backbeat together. But there's another way to split this up as well. So I could keep this simple 4 on the floor pattern with the shaker, and then I could make a new player. So that's maybe like percussion snare for the name, call it whatever you want. And then I can put the snare on the backbeat. And that gives the exact same effect as we had before with the chord notation. But this time, the advantage is it's separate, so we can manipulate it independently. So for example, if I put a clip on here, it actually doesn't affect the snare. So that can be very useful to break things up. So for example, we could put the kick on its own there, and we could put the shaker on its own. And we'd have full control over all of them. Now, what you want to do in terms of the patterns is entirely up to you. Any pattern can be made to work in Limut. So there's a bit more syntax that may be useful. So square brackets means split that step up. So for example, if I use the shaker with two lots in square brackets, then we get a sort of shuffly pattern there because we're playing 2 shakers in the time we were playing 1 shaker. If I put 3 in, then we actually put all 3 within that one single step within that pattern. I put 4 in, etc. So now we've actually got something on a 16th note, which that shaker is. I'm just going to quickly show you how to make the rhythm swing or set the swing. So I'm going to do set star swing, and I'm going to set it to 50 to start with, which is the default. So there's no difference there. Now what this syntax is doing is the set is overriding parameters on certain players. The star is a wildcard that means match every player. So I could set a particular player name here, or I can just set a star and it will set the swing parameter on every player. So this is exactly the same as if I went through all these players and actually just set the swing parameter on them. However, in this case, we are setting it to 50, which is the default value. Now this is a Lindrum swing percentage value. So if I set this to 66, it will be like a triplet swing. So you can hear that's got a triplet feel. That's actually the equivalent of doing something like this, I think. Yeah, so that's made a triplet feel. So the 66 is like it's 2/3 of the way through that part of the beat that you play the note. So it just delays the note to make it swing. Now you can set that to anything you want. So that's the straight unswung beat. You can set it, and yes, you increase the swing, and you can find some sort of a sweet spot where the swing does what you want it to do. Now you can set it really high, which you can hardly hear there because it's nearly playing it at the same time as the next note. But that's entirely up to you to find the swing that feels right for whatever tempo and style of music you're doing. Just a few more examples. So we can do like a son beat. This is one that is like a sort of rumba samba type of beat. Obviously you can find whatever sorts of beats you want to find and put them in, find the patterns for them. So what's going on here is we've got one beat with a hit on the beginning of the first beat, and then on the second beat we divided it up, and the second half of that, right at the end of the beat, we're playing again. Then the next beat we're waiting till the second half, and again, and then back on the first beat, and that gives you that conclave rhythm. So apart from that, obviously you can find whatever sorts of beats you want to. If you want to do something that's in waltz time, you can do that as well, and you don't have to change any parameters to do that. But here would be an example. So actually that's playing a bit too fast. The default is So that's dividing up into 3 basically. So that's playing a heavy kick on the first beat, and then a snare on the second beat and a snare on the third beat, and then it repeats back round and plays the heavy kick again. So that's dividing, so that's basically making 3 beats and then repeating. So that's like a waltz, that's like 4/4 time. If we then stick something in between, it still works fine. So if I just go back to what we had before, which was 4/4 time, I'll just take out that son rhythm. So we've now got a fairly simple beat again. But if we want to jazz up this beat a bit, then there's a few things we can do. I'm not going to get into too much sophisticated sort of rhythmic techniques, but here's a couple of examples of how we could jazz this up a bit. Obviously, we could set some effects, and so a classic thing to do would be to set some reverb on the snare. It's probably a bit much, which powers it up a bit. We can also change the pan. So we can set that, maybe pan to the left and the shaker to the right. Gives us a bit more stereo effect, a bit more, separates the sounds a bit more. Another example of something we can do is make a sort of rumble. There's a tom sound, which is quite good for that. Maybe throw in a few kicks as well. We can speed that up, get a bit of a rumble going. An alternative to speeding it up might be to use delay, which can be quite fun. So delay says how much to delay each beat or each event in the pattern. So 0 is don't delay it. We could delay it by an 8th note, which gives a sort of weird in-between syncopated effect. But what's quite fun is to use the round brackets to play multiple notes at a time. And we're going to play one with no delay, and then another one with a random delay that's either a quarter note, a half note, or 3/4 of a note. So that gives us a bit of a in-between rhythm. I'll just isolate that. So that gives us a sort of steady rhythm, but also a rhythm that's continually changing, because the randomness on the delay means that we're potentially building out a different version of the syncopation on the rhythm every time. And it's worth noting that the swing on this will apply. So every time we play something on a quarter note or 3/4, anything where it's a quarter of a beat, so that's what's called a 16th note in music, we will apply the swing to it. So for example, this will change if I apply a full triplet swing. And it will go back to being quite flat if I take the swing out. And then with a bit of swing, it's quite nice. So that gives us a sort of background rumble. Might be worth sticking a bit of reverb on that. Depends what effect you want to achieve. So another thing that we can do, we can get into all sorts of hi-hat patterns, hi-hat rhythms. So hyphen is a hi-hat, equals is an open hi-hat. Again, very much depends on what you want to do, what kind of rhythms you want to get out of it. Some other things that we can do that are quite fun. There's lots of samples that we can use for different things. It can actually be quite fun just to type in random words. Pretty much everything gives you some sort of a sound, so if we then do the same sort of delay trick, we can spice things up a bit. Actually, we'll stick a bit of wave folding on. Quite funky. So stuff we can do. We can use rate. Now the rate parameter, sorry, I'm just going to turn this down slightly. Better. Fits in better with the others, and you can probably hear me talk better. So I'm going to use the rate param. So by default that's 1, but this is the sample playback rate. So if I halve it, everything's playing at half speed and sounds very slowed down. If I do 2, everything's tinny and high pitched. But you can do things in between. We can choose either 2/3, 1, or 3 halves. We're choosing that at random now. Choose some different patterns. You can play around with this, do whatever you want to do. You may find certain sets of patterns or even certain words or phrases that sound good. So one thing to note what's going on here is we've actually got a pattern that's 10 steps long. So that's actually now playing a polyrhythm, because that's 5 beats long, whereas the rest of the percussion that we've got going on here is a 4-beat long rhythm. So we're actually now playing 5 beats against 4 beats. So one advantage of that, one respect in which that's good, is it will help to maintain interest in the rhythm, and it won't get so boring so quickly. So that's often an interesting thing to do. Just to jazz this up a bit, I'm going to float the pan on this from left to right over the course of 8 beats. So you should be able to hear that this player's stereo position is floating from left to right over the course of 8 beats and then back again. The L8 here is a linear interpolation. So that's saying move between -1 and 1 linearly and take 8 beats. There's a few other options as well, but I'm not going to get into all that. That would be for another tutorial. Okay, so I think that's given a fairly good overview. Hopefully it made sense. You can see some different things we can do. Hopefully you're starting to get a feel for it. Yeah, cool. Thanks.